The observation deck of the Galactic Coalition's research station hummed with its usual sterile efficiency, but Lieutenant Arya Venn had long since tuned out the ambient noise. She sat cross-legged against the reinforced viewing wall, her back pressed against the cold, transparent aluminum that separated her from the void of space beyond. The stars stretched endlessly before her, indifferent witnesses to her exhaustion. 3 rotations. That's how long she'd been awake, managing the emergency repairs after the solar flare had fried half the station's secondary systems. Her fingers still ached from rewiring circuits, and her mind felt like it had been stuffed with cotton. But the job was done. The station would survive. And now, finally, she could rest. Her eyes grew heavy as she stared at the nebula painted across the darkness, swirls of purple and gold that reminded her of watercolors bleeding together. She told herself she'd just close her eyes for a moment. Just one moment. Sleep claimed her before she could argue otherwise. The Kithari cubs had been watching the human for 2 full cycles now. There were 5 of them, ranging in age from barely weaned to nearly adolescent. Their species was apex predators from a death world the Coalition had designated as extremely hostile, a planet where even the plants had evolved offensive capabilities. The Kithari were all sleek muscle, retractable claws and jaws that could crush bone. Their eyes could see in spectrums humans couldn't imagine, and their reflexes were faster than a viper's strike. They were, by every measurable standard, superior hunters to humanity, yet they were fascinated by Lieutenant Arya Venn. "She's still not moving," whispered Caro, the oldest, his ear tufts twitching with curiosity. "Is she broken?" "Don't be stupid," hissed Mela, swatting him with her tail. "She's sleeping." My sire explained it. Humans enter a vulnerable state for hours at a time. It's bizarre. Vulnerable. The word sent a ripple of confusion through the group. The Kithari only needed brief rest periods, 15 minutes of light dormancy every few days. The idea of being truly unconscious for hours was alien to them, almost horrifying. Tiri, the smallest of the cubs, crept closer. She was barely half the size of her siblings, her fur still carrying the spotted pattern of youth. While the others debated the strangeness of human biology, she moved with the silent grace her species was known for, approaching the sleeping human with cautious reverence. "Tiri, don't," Mela started, but the smallest cub ignored her. Up close, the human looked different than Tiri had imagined. She'd seen Lieutenant Venn from afar, always moving with purpose, always working, her hands fixing things with a patience that baffled the cub's instructors. The Kithari believed in doing things quickly with overwhelming force. But humans were persistent, relentless. They didn't have the strength or speed of proper predators, yet somehow they'd conquered their world and then reached for the stars. Tiri studied the human's face. It was soft, vulnerable, with none of the protective plating or natural weapons the cub took for granted. How did such creatures survive? How did they become one of the dominant species in the Coalition? The human's breathing was deep and rhythmic. Her head had tilted slightly to one side, and Tiri noticed the uncomfortable angle of her neck. A wave of something unexpected washed over the cub. Not quite empathy. Her people weren't familiar with that word yet. But a kind of concern. Without fully understanding why, Tiri made a decision. She climbed. Her claws, still kitten-soft and not yet hardened to their lethal adult sharpness, found purchase on the human's uniform. She scaled up carefully, mindful not to pierce the fabric too deeply. When she reached the human's shoulder, she settled there, adjusting her small body until she found the perfect position. Then, with a soft sigh, Tiri used Lieutenant Arya Venn's shoulder as a rest. Her own head drooping as comfort overtook caution. The other cub stared in shock. "She's going to get eaten," Caro whispered, his eyes wide. But nothing happened. The human continued sleeping, her breathing undisturbed, and Tiri, perched on her shoulder, began to purr, a sound the Kithari made only when feeling absolutely safe. Arya woke slowly, consciousness returning in layers. First came awareness of her body, stiff muscles, a crick in her neck. Then came the sounds of the station, and finally the strange warmth on her shoulder and the soft rumbling vibration against her collarbone. Her eyes opened. She turned her head slowly, carefully, and found herself staring at a sleeping Kithari cub. The small creature was curled against her neck, tiny paws tucked under its body, its spotted fur rising and falling with each breath. Arya's heart should have raced. The Cathari were dangerous even as cubs. Their instincts were predatory, their strength already formidable. But instead she felt something else entirely, a warmth that had nothing to do with the cub's body heat. The other cubs watched from across the observation deck, their eyes glowing in the dim light. They looked tense, ready to bolt or attack, she couldn't tell which. Slowly, very slowly, Arya raised her hand. The movement caught every cub's attention. Several hissed, their hackles rising, but Arya ignored them, focusing instead on the small creature using her as furniture. With infinite gentleness, she stroked the cub's spotted head, her fingers running along the soft fur. Tiri's purring intensified. The other cub's aggressive postures faltered. They watched, transfixed as the human, the soft, weak, bizarre human, performed what could only be described as grooming behavior on their youngest member. Tiri leaned into the touch, still half asleep, completely trusting. "You're a brave little thing, aren't you?" Arya whispered, her voice soft enough not to startle. She didn't know if the cub understood her words, but Tiri's eyes opened slightly, meeting hers. In that moment, something passed between them. Not language, not even true communication, but an understanding nonetheless. Humans were weak. They had no claws, no natural armor, no enhanced senses. They slept for unconscionable hours in vulnerable positions. They should have been prey, but they weren't. They were something else entirely. Something that could be trusted to protect even when defenseless themselves. Something that would wake up with a predator on their shoulder and respond not with violence but with gentleness. The Cathari cubs didn't have a word for this quality yet. Their language was built for hunting commands and territorial warnings, not for describing the peculiar courage of being kind when you had every reason to be afraid. But they would learn it, in time. The galaxy was full of species with claws and fangs and venom. What made humans special wasn't what they could do to others. It was what they chose not to do. Tiri curled tighter against Arya's neck, and the human settled back against the wall, her hand still resting protectively on the small predator. Outside, the nebula continued its slow cosmic dance, painting the darkness with impossible colors. And on a research station floating between the stars, a human and a predator cub slept together, perfectly safe in each other's company.